Hello everyone, welcome to another video from Fantasy Football Scout on the Euro 2020 tournament. You'll see there is a skull on your screen, and that is because this is the group of death. I'm joined by David Monday. How are you doing, my friend?
Well, I'm certainly feeling a lot more excited about the Euros than I think fans of Hungary and of Germany in particular. I think
Yeah.
those two teams in particular must be so scared about this group. I think France and Portugal, probably just like me, excited for the challenge and ready to get going.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, it's the group of death because, obviously you've got three kind of topped nations in there, but Germany, the kind of expectation for Germany is low, I think. And I know from
Joachim
speaking...
Low, actually.
Yep, very good, yeah. Very fitting. Because, I mean, I've been speaking to fans of Germany and they are worried about kind of their prospects in this group. Fans of Hungary are obviously quite pessimistic, but... you never know. They could get a couple of points in it, and yeah, I think France and Portugal are done. Right, so that's this group done. We will see. No, not really. We've got loads more to talk about, but pretty much, it's a really interesting group though. It's the kind of when you're looking at matches in these group stages, obviously it's always exciting to see top teams going at it and getting to see France, Portugal, France, Germany, Germany, Portugal in the group stages is really exciting. So yeah, what do you think? So you kind of mentioned. Well, you kind of mentioned your thoughts already. You think Hungary going to be the whipping boys, Germany going to struggle, and France and Portugal, to clean up? Who's going to win out of those two then? Who's going to win the group?
Yeah, I tell you what, in terms of who's going to win the group, I'm not sure, but I don't think it necessarily matters too much for the teams that. So as I've already said, I think Portugal and France have got to be the favourites to finish top two, but because of the way this tournament's worked out, there's less disadvantage, so to speak, from finishing second. Because if you finish second, you can end up still playing a third place team from another one. So, I don't think they'll necessarily. I actually think they're going to draw with each other personally.
Yeah.
Because they're two teams with good defences and, probably don't want to lose that game.
Just cancel each other out.
But yeah, I think so. And then, in terms of the other teams, Germany, I think this has got to be the first time in a long time where a German team's come into an international tournament and the expectation has been this low. So I think they can probably still get through if they maybe beat Hungary and get a draw against the others, which is not, completely unimaginable, because even though things aren't quite right with them, there are still players that are available to them and the manager that does have experience of tournament football and sort of knowing how to navigate it. And there being three potential berths out of the group, maybe they can still get out. But then Hungary, it's a shame because I'm quite a big fan of sort of like reading up about and kind of knowing a lot about sort of really old football. So we're talking like 30s, 40s, 50s, and they used to be obviously one of the best teams in the world in the 1950s, and it hasn't really worked out for them since then. So I'm excited to have them at the tournament, and I don't think they're a bad team, but they have just been given the worst possible draw here. It's just so, I don't want to say unfair, but it does feel a bit, when you look at some of the other groups, the fact that these three teams are all in the same one is very unfair on the fourth seed. They're going to play some games at home, so I'm sure they'll enjoy it, but it's hard to get too excited about them for getting through. But I wouldn't write them off because anything can happen in tournament football. So.
I mean, 2 to 3 points is probably going to be the aim for them. I mean, if they could get a win, it would be a pretty big deal. If they could get a couple of draws, I think that they'd probably take that and not just lose every game. I mean, there's talk from, I'm seeing a few people kind of, these prediction things that comes around, and quite a common prediction is Germany not to get out of this group. And I just think all they need to do really is beat Hungary and not suffer massive losses to France and Portugal. If they can pick up a point, I reckon that's probably enough. The third place thing isn't my favourite, because it kind of ruins it a little bit. I'd rather it was just the top two that went through and there was that real battle going on for those top two places. This best third place thing doesn't really sit right with me. So I think Germany, if Germany went out of the group stage in this group with Hungary there, I think that would be an absolute disaster. I don't think they will. I think they'll scrape through, but I don't think they're going to be in contention for first or second place. I think if they do, it'll be from third. So let's have a look at some stats. So obviously France qualified top of their group. They played 10, they won 8. They drew 1 and lost 1. So it wasn't like Italy who won all their games and There's another side who won all the games. Can't remember who it was, but was it England, or did we lose one?
No, we lost to
No,
the Czech Republic.
yeah, we did. Yeah, there's another team that won. So best team in the world, but still drew and lost one. 25 goals for, 6 goals against, 5 clean sheets. It's a pretty solid record. I've got some more stats for you, David, because I did extra research for you because I know that you love stats. So since qualifying, France have won 9, they've drawn 2, and they've lost 1. Do you know who they lost to?
France.
Here's one for you.
Qualifying.
Trivia question. Yep.
I was going to say Turkey, but that was in qualifying.
Yeah. No. They lost 2-0 at home to Finland.
Of course it did. Pookie Party, right?
Pookie Party. Absolutely. So, looking at the teams they've played since, they've played the likes of Sweden, they've played Croatia, they've played the Ukraine, they've played Portugal. They've played some top teams in the Nations League. In qualifying, they played Ukraine, they played Kazakhstan, they played Bosnia, and then they played Wales in a friendly. So they've had a bit of a mix of players, but they have tested themselves against some of the top teams kind of in the tournament and done well in those, won most of those. They drew against Portugal, but kind of won the rest. So it's a good record, right? They're going into the tournament favourites for the whole thing. They've got a strong form going into it. Players in form. Benzema's back in the squad. Do you think they're going to win it?
Well, they've certainly got a fantastic chance. I mean, they're a team that just has pretty much everything. Teams that tend to win tournaments are ones that have strength and depth, which they do, scintillating attack, which they do, the ability to control possession in midfield, which they do, and a strong defence as well, which they also have. So they just have everything. And 3 clean sheets in their last 3 matches. And the thing is that Deschamps has obviously done a very good job of basically taking this team and making it almost better than the sum of its parts. But the parts are all pretty good anyway.
Yeah.
And it's very similar to the team that won in 2018. Not a massive amount has really changed. It all kind of is built around that double pivot of Kante and Pogba, which is just imperious when they're at their best. Yeah. And for France, they tend to be. And then in terms of the only differences, they've got... it's interesting because Deschamps has earned a lot of plaudits for sort of his I don't want to say man management because it's not about getting alongside players, but basically just like ejecting anyone from the group who he conceived to be someone who would be a problem. And so then that was the case with Rabiot, because I think Rabiot had sort of complained about not being in the full team for 2018. So he said, all right, well, you're never going to play for France again. And then obviously the stuff with Benzema, he's not played for France for years and years. And obviously that helped them achieve some success. Both of those players are now back.
I know.
And they're in the group. But if anything, on the pitch at least, it just makes them even better. Rabiot kind of plays in this kind of out of position thing on the left, and Benzema, of course, as we know, is one of the most reliable kind of centre forwards in European football of the last decade. So, if anything, they've got better. They've got more strength and depth. So this team just looks really, really good. They've got tournament experience. And to be honest, everyone always forgets, I think, sometimes, unless they're French, of course, that they were the team that probably should have won the last Euros. So they've arguably been one of, if not the best European team of the last 5 years, because they were the best team at Euro 2016 until they kind of got done by Portugal and France. Now, it's not to say Portugal didn't deserve to win, but France should have won home soil, etc. And then that obviously is what spurred them on to go and win the World Cup. So they look really, really good. I think if I, gun to my head, I had to pick a winner for this group, I would probably pick France. But I mean, it is close with Portugal because they're no pushovers either.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like with the cycle of international football as well. I was listening to the Champ Man stream. Obviously, our new pro pundit Andy North does that, and they were talking about cycles of domestic football is very different to international football. When you mentioned that, like teams like Hungary, back in the day were like kind of the top teams, and then we had Spain winning everything, and then Germany suddenly at the front, and now they've sunk down, and now it seems like it's kind of France's turn to really be that national side that kind of bosses it. So yeah, expectations are massively high, and to the point where if they don't win it, then I think this tournament's a failure for them. But they've got the squad, they've got the manager, I think, to deal with that pressure and do really well. So yeah, they're my favourites to win the whole thing. I'm afraid it's hard to look past them. Let's talk about Germany next. So Germany, decent qualifying, played 8, won 7, only lost 1. They scored 30 goals, they only conceded 7. They kept 4 clean sheets. Would you like some stats post-qualifying as well? Because I've got some for you. 5 wins, 4 draws, 2 losses. So 4 draws, which I found quite interesting in this. They drew with Spain, they drew with Switzerland, they drew with Turkey, and they drew with Denmark. So these are all teams in Europe. So struggling to break them down, I think. And I think that is how teams will set up against Germany in this tournament. I think they're obviously a good side. They've got talented players, but they need the likes of Havertz and Werner to kind of propel them forward. And as we know, there's a little bit of inconsistency between them. They're better on the international stage, especially Werner. I mean, he does much better for Germany than he has been doing domestically for Chelsea. But I think teams will know that they can frustrate Germany and look to set up and block them. So I think they're going to find it a bit hard to break down some teams. What do you reckon on Germany?
Yeah, well, I think you're spot on there with what teams know about them, because the manager's kind of been on his way out for quite some time now. So it's kind of the general impression I've been getting from reading around Germany and talking to people is that the last sort of 2 years basically has very much felt like last day of term for the manager, because he's going to leave at the end of this tournament. And so then that obviously has just kind of created a situation where they are not the type of team that can just kind of conquer anyone. And historically they just got to the semi-finals of everything, but the chances of them being able to do that this time seem quite low. And in terms of it, I basically don't think it takes very much frustration to expose some of the cracks in this Germany team. I'm going to quote World Soccer Magazine here. So these aren't my words. These are from them. That apparently their play of late has been characterized by sloppy defensive play, a lack of on-field communication, not enough leaders on the pitch, negative body language, and no tactical plan B. And all of those things are the kind of things that any team will know. I mean, it's pretty scathing, isn't it?
Damning, yeah.
Any team will know that if there's a team that has that makeup to them, then to setting up to cause them, to defensively to kind of frustrate them, then all of those things are just going to get more easily exposed. And we've already talked about what France's fantastic defence. I think they're a team that can easily set themselves up to negate Germany. And of course, Portugal are going to the tournament with, Ruben Diaz. And Jose Fonts just won Ligue 1 with Lille, and they got Pepe as well. He's vastly
Cancelo
experienced
as well, great defender.
They've got some great defensive players in that team. So those two teams can definitely frustrate Germany in a way where they can definitely punish them on the counter-attack. And Hungary probably won't try to punish them on the counter-attack. They'll probably just try and frustrate them and get a draw, because as we sort of saw, I think they actually, Hungary may have got out of their group with a couple of draws in the last Euros, or at least were trying to. So that's going to be no problem for them. So I think it's going to be quite easy to cause this team problems. But I mean, of course, and that's also, we've seen it in a couple of results as well. So they got thrashed 6-0 by Spain within the last year. Famously lost at home to North Macedonia in a World Cup qualifier as well. And they're kind of now drawing on players who hadn't played for the team for quite some time to kind of, we're trying to go down the route of let's try and test out some youth. Hasn't really worked in quite the, it hasn't made as much progress as they'd like. So they brought Muller and Hummels back. So they played in the friendly draw with Denmark the other day. That was the first time either of these two players had played for the national team in 3 years. So there's just not a lot going for them right now, and there's a lot going against them. So yeah, I mean, I haven't had a single draft where I've picked a Germany player for this tournament. Nor
have I. And they're expensive as well. The likes of Havertz and Werner, 8 million plus. I think there's very few bargains to be had in defence. It's really hard to know kind of who's gonna perform well. I mean, I think like I said, that game against Hungary is going to be absolutely crucial to Germany qualifying. I think even as in third place, and I can see Hungary making life difficult for them and sitting back. So let's talk about Hungary. So they played 8, they won 4, they lost 4. They were the only team, I believe, to finish 4th and still get through. So they didn't have a particularly good qualifying campaign. They really did kind of almost luck their way into it. 8 goals for, 11 goals against, only 2 clean sheets out of 8. Yeah, I know. Don't worry, David. The extra stats are coming. They've done well. They've done really, really well since qualifying, though. They've only lost once since the beginning of 2020. That was a 3-2 home match against Russia. They've beaten Turkey, who are people's favourites, to be like a kind of dark horse in this tournament. They've beaten Bulgaria. They've beaten Serbia. They drew with Russia. They beat Iceland. They drew with Serbia again. They beat Turkey again. So they beat Turkey twice in the Nations League, which is interesting. They drew with Poland. And then they beat San Marino and they beat Andorra. So 7 wins, 3 draws, 1 loss. They're coming into the tournament in good form. Does that change your mind about them at all?
Perhaps not to get any of their fantasy players.
Yeah.
But certainly
I'm really trying to sell them to you.
Well, I mean, it's just because, so I'm looking forward to seeing them at the tournament. As I said, I always enjoy watching Hungary from a kind of posterity perspective of like, are the days of, Puskas going to come back? I'd love that. I really would. But, when we're picking our teams here, you have to kind of really be able to feel like the money you're spending is going to be, like returned. And to be honest, the only Hungary player I've had so far in my team is Nego, I think is how you pronounce his name, because he's a 4 million midfielder. That's the only reason he's there.
One of the highest owned players in the game, actually, because he's 4 million.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that kind of possibly counts against him is Dominik Szoboszlai. I think I've pronounced that correctly, but I'm sure I haven't. Is injured for the tournament as well.
Yep, Szoboszlai, very good.
Yeah,
nailed it.
I've been practicing it. So in the bathroom, like Szoboszlai, my kids think I'm going crazy. But like he's injured for the tournament, and that I think that's going to hurt them. So look, I mean, a lot of people are playing the strategy of let's focus on match day one, right? And while I think that Hungary might spring a few surprises at the tournament, I don't think it's going to come in match day one when they play Portugal, who I think are quite a well-oiled team.
Yeah.
Very ambitious, great defense. I'm a lot of people are looking at Cancelo, aren't they, or Diaz, or a Portuguese defender for that first game week. When if you're going for that strategy of using your chips in match day 2 and 3, so yeah, I'm not really looking at them at the moment, but I wouldn't be too shocked if they do something, but it's probably going to be against Germany, I think.
Yeah, it's one of those ones, isn't it? Interesting to watch from a football perspective, but probably not one to bring in any of their players in the team. I mean, we're going to go through this squad in a bit. I'll try and sell you one of their players, but I sense that I probably won't have much success. I mean, the loss they had against Russia was back in September in 2020. So they've played a lot of matches since, and not been beaten. So. Yeah, like I said, they're in good form, but very difficult group. Okay, so the final team in the group is Portugal. They had a good qualifying campaign, played 8-1-5, drew 2, lost 1. They scored 22 goals. They only conceded 6 goals in the tournament, so really low with France as well. The only teams to concede less than, I believe, were Italy and Turkey in the groups. 4 clean sheets out of 8. They came second in the group. I've got some stats for you. Don't you worry. They've played 11 games. Since qualifying, they've won 7, they've drawn 3, they've lost 1. They've also tested themselves against some good sides, so teams that are in the Euros. They beat Croatia 4-1, they beat Sweden 2-0. They drew with Spain, they drew with France, so 2 big games there they weren't beaten in. They then beat Sweden 3-0. They lost to France in their second to last Nations League game. They lost 1-0 though, so really tight game. Then they beat Croatia again. And then 2021, they've kind of just gone, let's just play some really easy matches in qualifying, and they've beaten Azerbaijan 1-0. So they really scraped through that game against sort of a really poorly ranked team. They then drew with Serbia, and they beat Luxembourg quite comfortably. So obviously, it's a good record. The only team they've lost to since kind of late 2020 is France. But they haven't really played any. The World Cup qualifying group is hard because obviously a lot of the teams are quite poorly ranked, and they haven't exactly done. They haven't been tearing up trees in that, but they still come to this tournament one of the favourites to win the whole thing. And you're a fan, right?
Yeah, I really like this Portugal team. I mean, I think it was about 6 months ago when I started, because I mean, obviously we follow Premier League football very closely at Fantasy Football Scout, and just. I'm a big fan of my second mention. So you'll talk about Bruno Fernandes, and the next time you mention him, the Portuguese midfielder. And I started to realise I was typing that, the Portuguese, after so many talented players. And just hit me about 6 months ago that they have just got such a good team for this tournament. Now, the thing is that a good team doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna win it. But I mean, I'd argue this team is actually better on paper than the one that won this 5 years ago. So I certainly think that there's a chance of them going to the final once again. And on the subject of, they don't necessarily always blow teams away. The thing is, this is what I find really interesting about Portugal is the manager is actually a lot more conservative than you might expect for someone who has a team that's filled with so many attacking players. But in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, that is what makes them so good, because let's not forget that defence wins you championships. So that's why I think they can go far. And the defence is pretty good because, as we've already mentioned, coming into this tournament, Ruben Diaz, in the form of his life, completely transformed Man City's defence this year. Jose Font, age is just a number, right? I think he's like 37 now. But he's obviously just gone and helped win Liga with Lille, and they had the best defensive. So basically, those two guys have helped create the best defensive record in their respective domestic leagues. Absolutely. And as I said, Pepe's available as well as a centre back who's very experienced as well and knows how to wind people up and get people sent off. So they've got that nous there. And the thing is, just back to the idea of the way they play, they have mostly played 4-4-2. Of late, it's kind of maybe merged into a 4-3-3 because the manager's starting to come under a little bit more pressure to play a more attacking formation because look at all these great attacking players that we've got. But the point is that so it's 4 defeats in the last 56 competitive matches, and they've won 2 trophies in that time. So you can't really land too much blame at Santos's door for going for a more conservative setup. And generally speaking, teams that kind of work their way through very workmanlike through tournaments can get very far. And Portugal have already done that. Like, if you want to think of the best example of an uninspiring kind of attritional, let's just keep going. The last team to really do that in an international tournament was them. Yeah. And as I said, I think they're better than they were before. And now they've got
a better squad. I mean, and that's supported by those 3 games against Spain, against France, and against Spain, and then France twice. So in those 3 matches, they only conceded 1 goal. The other 2 games were both 0-0 ball fest. So they're not afraid to, go into that attritional spot and just think, if we can get 1 goal, we'll sit back or we'll wait for something and we'll try and counter and things like that. So it's interesting from a fantasy perspective, and we'll talk about the squad in a bit, because it does make me think, definitely in this group, other than targeting that first match against Hungary, I'm not sure the likes of like Ronaldo and Jota and those and Fernandes, for example, are going to be worth it in the group stages when we've got other players. But this is a very tough group to think of from a fantasy perspective, because you want to get in the best players, but they haven't actually got the fixtures to support it. Anyway, let's talk about squads. So we start with France, the favourites. The big surprise here is one of the highest owned players in the game is Kante, which strikes me as a very casual pick for people who don't fully understand what they're buying into with him. He's 5.5 million. I mean, he's not even 4.5 or that cheap. There's decent players around that bracket and around the 6 million bracket. So I don't think we need to talk too much about him. Obviously, absolutely fantastic player, one of the best in the world. Won everything now, I think, that he can win in terms of trophies. But fantasy-wise, no thank you. Then you've got Mbappe, 34%, 12 million forward. I've got some stats on him as well. I'll just bring those up straight away just because he's such a big player. So 31 appearances, 27 goals, 7 assists in League One. In the Champions League, 10 appearances, 8 goals. And then in the Cup, 5 appearances, 7 goals. So 47 appearances in total, 42 goals, 11 assists. He's off the back of a fantastic season, as he so often is. He's one of the world's best. He's playing for the best team. Surely he's a dead cert in your team, right, David?
I don't know. So Mbappe...
That was a trick question.
Yeah, it was, yeah. Well, Mbappe, obviously, I'm not saying that he's not one of the most exciting players in world football. Obviously did very well at the World Cup. I think he scored possibly twice in the World Cup final. So, the stage is never going to faze him. I don't think it ever will. That's why he's such a good young player. For France, though, I sort of think I possibly prefer Griezmann, I think, just because, generally speaking, their international record, Griezmann's is better. So in terms of goals, that is. So Mbappe, 16 goals in 42 appearances. Griezmann is 35 goals in 89. So it's slightly better for Griezmann. Griezmann has slightly more assist potential as well, because Griezmann tends to play this number 10 role for France, and also is considerably cheaper, I think.
He's not in form, is he?
Oh no, sorry, he's 11 million. Yeah, he's not in form, but he's one of those players who seems to always turn up for the tournament. So he's got 10 goals across the last World Cup and the Euros. I think it's 5 at each. And it's quite rare. It is quite rare for a player to have done that. We did an article on site recently about how many players tend to score lots of goals at a tournament, and it is quite a rare thing. So if Mbappe can do it this summer, then great. Then he's gone and sort of not prove me wrong, because I don't think he can't do it. But if we're talking about players who have done it before, Griezmann is definitely one of them. So at the last Euros,
you'd go for him over Benzema, would you?
So the thing with Benzema, I'm just not really sure if he's going to play. He's obviously in the squad, but Giroud is very much has been the key man for them. And even though he doesn't score goals, he doesn't.
It can't be Giroud. He hasn't played about 5 minutes this season.
Generally speaking, I don't really want to own a French forward, to be perfectly honest, because I whether it's Giroud or Benzema, I couldn't tell you which one's going to play more games, because even though Giroud doesn't score goals, this team still works when he's the centre forward. I think Giroud is possibly one of the most underrated players in world football of the last decade, to be honest, because you don't go and win the World Cup playing his role, scoring no goals, and stay in the team.
I feel like he's overrated because of how many people call him underrated. Well, bit like Michael Carrick, you know. Everyone's always, he's the underrated player. Yeah, we know. Everyone knows how underrated he is. But no, I do agree. I mean, I just think it would be a pretty sensational thing to do to bring Benzema back into the international fold, given the season he's had and the seasons he's had going into this tournament, and then carry on with Giroud, who's played.
Deschamps doesn't care what people think.
No, I know he doesn't. I mean, Benzema's there at 10 million. He's 10% owned. So if you go purely by ownership, which you shouldn't do, people are definitely backing him. Giroud's down there 8 million forward at 1%.
But surely Griezmann is more locked into the team than either of those two.
Absolutely.
Because no one else plays his role. And just going back to what I said about the last Euros and the last World Cup, it's quite rare for a player to get that many goals. I think it was something like at the last Euros, only 12 players scored more than one goal. So and Griezmann scored 5, and then he did that again at the World Cup. So he's a tournament guy, and we've seen players like him, like Muller is one, Ronaldo is one. The big stage and the occasion. I wouldn't be too shocked if we see Griezmann do as well, if not better than Mbappe or Benzema.
Top tip. I think 11 million's a lot. And especially with the full classification, but it's interesting. If down in the later stage of the tournament, I think it's very, very likely. I mean, it would be a miracle if we don't end up with at least a couple of French players in our team at some point. So we've got to keep our eye on which players are performing, and it could be the likes of Griezmann that serve as differentials. He's right down there on 3% ownership. Everyone's going to be going for Mbappe. I guess we'll know who's going to be first choice out of Benzema and Giroud after a couple of games. So there's that. Okay, what about in defence? So you've got the likes of Varane there, Pavard. You've got Hernandez at 6.5. We think those three are going to be first choice. All quite expensive, 6 million, 6.5 million, difficult group. I'm steering away from them. Are you tempted by any French defenders?
Yeah, not really, not yet. I mean, they'll be the kind of defenders I'd look at later in the competition when we got a bit more money. I mean, the defenders I'm looking at the moment are people like Denayer, Alioski, Ristovski,
4.5,
Arajuri from Fulham. They just don't offer anything like that. And a lot of us are all going for the spend big up top, right? And in order to make that, because that's where a lot of the talent is, like Kane, Lukaku, Depay.
Yeah,
you want to make that happen and include, if you want to have a De Bruyne or a Fernandes or whatever, like a player like that in midfield. I'm not really seeing too many drafts where they're spending big in defence and it really works. So yeah. Especially in a tough group. Yeah, not for me.
Well, Kimpembe's there at 5.5. He's the one that I'd go for just because he's that 0.5 cheaper. I think Hernandez could be in for a big tournament, and he has got very low ownership at 6.5. I think he's probably one for a bit later on, maybe, or when they play Hungary if you want to get one in. But yeah, I wouldn't start with any of them personally. I'm going to be starting with no French players. So yeah, be interesting to see how they get on. Okay, so secondly, we're going to go to Germany. So Kimmich is the most owned German player at 23%. I think, again, this is a case of great player, not a great fantasy football player. I don't think we can expect massive returns from him. It's not the role he plays for Germany. Germany have got a tough grip. All this kind of stuff is the same time. We won't spend too much time on him. Rudiger's there, 12%. I think people, again, bought into the fact he had that amazing run in the Chelsea side, Champions League final. Man possessed for the second half of the season, like just absolute monster everywhere, like breaking De Bruyne's face and just arguing with everyone. And because you mentioned Pepe earlier, he's that kind of player, isn't he? He instigates people and he's always in the thick of things. And
he's a bit more sly. Like with Pepe, it's really shameless and dare I say it, reckless. But Rudiger seems to know how to just about keep it on the line of So I agree. I think great player.
Horrible player to play against, I imagine. So again, Neuer's there at 12%. So you've got a couple of defenders here that people are backing. So Neuer and Rudiger, and then you've got Werner. So Werner is just a complete enigma to me. I mean, he's an 8.5 forward. He's 6% owned, so he's a real differential if you're looking for someone, to take people by surprise a bit. I mean, he's just, I'll get his stats up. He's such a strange player. He came. We don't want to make this the Werner podcast, but he came with such a high reputation. 35 appearances, 6 goals. 12 assists, which is pretty decent. In Champions League, 4 goals, 12 assists. He scored in the FA Cup, scored in the Carabao Cup. So his total in 52 appearances was 12 goals. And this was a striker who was billed to be one of the world's best. You know, he's been doing it at Red Bull Leipzig. He's been doing it for Germany. Came with such like, I can't remember a player really being heralded so much as Werner coming in the side and just hasn't delivered. What do you make of him?
Yeah, he's one of these players who I think his greatest strength is sometimes his greatest weakness if he's in a team that isn't really built to service him. So my view on his campaign with Chelsea is that his greatest strength is his pace and his ability to hang off the shoulder of the last defender. Now, in order for that to actually work, then you have to time it perfectly. And the reason why he was doing it so well for Leipzig was that he'd been in that team for several years. They'd worked on the timings of everything. And I think perhaps maybe just with VAR coming in, him coming to a VAR situation, you know, he's been very unlucky with that, for example. I think his season numbers would look significantly better in a world we didn't have VAR because it would be a lot more marginal. And then a lot of those situations, he's obviously not got too much confidence either. So that is going to count against him. But I think this Germany team is a little bit more used to playing with him. You know, when I say it's his greatest weakness, is the fact that if he's so quick, if he goes just that split second too fast, he's offside. Some people may say maybe he needs to run along the line before he runs beyond the defender. Maybe that's something he needs to work on. But I think I wouldn't be too shocked if he ends up looking a better player for Germany than he has done for Chelsea. The other thing, of course, is that in the Champions League final, I think that summed up what he does that goes under the radar. Now, it's not going to get you fantasy points, but the way that he timed his run to pull Diaz out of the way, to let Havertz through, score the goal, of course, he could do exactly that for Germany because, of course, they played together. So there are parts of his game that do very well, but do I trust him enough to own him in fantasy? Not particularly, especially when Thomas Muller's back in the team. And I was just talking about Griezmann earlier, about players who have just got a fantastic record for just doing it in these tournaments. He is definitely one. It was 5 goals at the 2010 World Cup, then a further 5 goals at the 2014 World Cup. You know, so he just does really well in tournaments, generally speaking. And I'm probably, I could be wrong when I say this, but in terms of tournament goals, like he's probably not going to break Klose's record, but he's sort of closer to it. So I mean, I'm not going to say that he's going to, you know, completely lift off, but again, I'm not going to be shocked if I see Muller getting more goals than Werner at this tournament. Maybe with Werner making the runs to let him into the space. So I'm not that convinced, and I can't believe I'm going to say this because I know I'm going to get slayed for it, but I just can't help myself sometimes. I'm not convinced that Werner is as good as people think he is. I've watched him a lot. I've watched a lot of Chelsea play. I don't think he's a good player. I'm not saying that he's not a good player, but he's, in terms of that intelligence and his decision making and his runs, I don't know if he's at the top level of that. I don't think his control of the ball is that good. I don't think his finishing's that good. I look at him and I think there's a lot of weaknesses that he's got that I didn't see or hear about when he first signed. So I don't know whether it is a kind of a full confidence thing, whether it is struggling with the system or what. But I would agree that he does need to learn to time those runs better.
Yeah,
if the team isn't going to find him in time.
I just don't know if I can see him really, really kicking on and being that player that Chelsea want. I think Chelsea are going to have to sign a striker if they want to compete for the title next year. And I think that pushes Werner out to the left, where he's probably competing with Pulisic. And I think Pulisic is better than him. So I wouldn't be too surprised to see Werner flop at Chelsea. And I think this tournament could be make or break for him, really, in terms of what happens with his career. No pressure, Timo. The player I do like, though, is Kai Havertz. I got wrongly slated for my Sunday League comments about him, which were taken completely out of context, I might add. Always rated him. I think he has got that intelligence. He has got that class. He's got that elegance. When he's on form, just to glide around the pitch, pick up pockets of space, everything he does, he's got a proper footballing brain. I'm really looking forward to seeing him in this tournament. 9 million, though, in fantasy.
It's a bit much, isn't it?
It's a lot, isn't it? Much. It's a lot.
And annoyingly, his first game isn't on a Sunday, so that's not the day where he's normally at his best. Is that right? Because he's a Sunday league footballer.
Yeah, very good. I thought you had an amazing stat there that like Havertz only scores on a Sunday, but oh no, I see. Very good.
Sorry, I'm jumping on the bandwagon. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know if he's will ever be that fantasy player that we all want. I don't know if he's capable of getting, you know, hat tricks and braces and big and thick everything. I think he's a player that makes the team better, and that kind of player often a bit like David Silva maybe. I mean, David Silva was one of the best players I think we've ever had in the Premier League, but fantasy wise quite frustrating to own because he'd kind of tick over a bit, never really go full explosion, could never really captain him and feel quite safe. So again, I think in this tournament, I'm not sure that I'd be going for Havertz, but again, really looking forward to seeing him. Gundogan's there at 7.5, could be interesting.
It's interesting with him because I mean, I think he will get some attention because of how well he's done in FPL this year, but I couldn't tell you necessarily if he's capable of doing that. For Germany, completely different manager, completely different system, and obviously the need for him to play that role that he did for Man City was very much from the fact that they didn't have a centre forward, and Guardiola had carved that out for him. I mean, I just wanted to touch whilst we're on midfielders about Kimmich, is that if you do want a midfielder, then I sort of from Germany. I mean, this is real realms of like if you really, really need this, but I don't think you do. I think that he could be worth looking at, but I just want to say the reason why he is so well owned, I think, is because people possibly remember that in the World Cup game, I think he was listed as a defender, and I think he was playing as a defender that would often come into midfield, whereas now he just is a central midfield player. So I would don't expect as much as what we could have got from him from the last World Cup just because of his classification, I suppose.
I think we're kind of writing off Germany a little bit, but you look at Kimmich, you look at Gundogan, amazing season he's had, Havertz hitting form at the right time, Champions League winner, scoring the final goal. Then they've got the likes of Sané, they've got Rudiger in defence, they've got Neuer. I mean, it's not like they've got a bad squad going into this tournament. They could perform essentially, and I don't want to write them off. I'm surprised to see so many people saying that they're not going to get out of the group, because I think they will definitely get out of the group, even if it's third place. And if they do go on a run, you never really know. But yeah, it's just going to be whether Lowe can get the most out of them. Okay, so third we've got Hungary. Fantasy League says that we're not looking at all the data, hyping up Turkey so much and calling Hungary whipping boys while their form is great. And Hungary also beat Turkey 2 times. Yeah, absolutely. The difference is the group, though. Turkey's group, I think, is tight, and I think Turkey should get out of that group in second place. If Hungary get out of this group, they've done absolutely incredibly. I think you call Hungary the whipping boys not so much because we think Hungary are absolutely terrible, but just because the 3 teams they're playing are some of the best ranked teams in the world. So that would be my counter argument to that. Anyway, their squad. I mean, they go there at 42% ownership, 4 million mid. Looking at the team, I mean, the biggest omission here is where's my notes? Because I wrote down how to pronounce his name. So Boszlai, like you said. Yeah. All the Hungarian fans I spoke to said he is like the star man. He's the most expensive Hungarian player, I think, of all time. Got a big money move. All the nation's hopes kind of rested with him, and he's out the tournament. So yeah, not exactly amazing. I think it's very difficult to kind of recommend any of these players. So we won't spend too long on them. The one I will just touch on is Salai. I think that's how you pronounce it. He plays in the Bundesliga. Got 8 goals, 6 assists in 28 appearances.
Do you mean Salai or Shalai? Because there's 2, isn't there?
Is there? Oh God! I mean the one that got 8 goals and 6 assists in 28 appearances.
Salai with this Salai.
That's the one.
Salai.
That's the one.
I think. But there's also Adam Jalai, which is Szalai. And according to World Soccer Magazine, they're going to start up front together. So
cool.
That's going to be
that's
fun.
helpful. That's Salai to Salai, and Salai scores. Yeah, no, Salai, the double L one. So he's a 6.5 billion forward with 0% ownership. He seems to be the one that the Hungarians are backing to kind of, well, confidence isn't high, but if they are going to pick up a few points, he's going to be the one. I'm not saying I don't think he's going to be a factor. I don't think we should spend too much time on Hungary just because I don't think their fantasy options are really. There's better options. I mean,
no Hungarian player scored more than 2 players in qualifying, and I know it's been a while. I get that, but they didn't exactly. They can qualify and start. So
sorry, Hungary. I'm really looking forward to seeing your team in the Euros, but I will not be going anywhere near any of your players. And especially, and even like someone like Nigo at 4 million. I'm just not convinced that going for like a 4 million option on your bench is the best strategy in this game, because I want to be able to bring players in. If I have a player who blanks, I want to bring in another player who's got potential to get something out of it. And I don't want to have 4 million bench fodder. That's all very well in FPL to maximise your squad, but I think in this game there's 5 million midfielders who are a lot better. So I think you should stretch and go up a tier if you can. Final squad. So the final squad of this group is Portugal. Ruben Diaz, highest owned, 42%. I believe he's the highest owned defender in the game. You've then got the likes of Ronaldo, 26%. So only 1 in 4 teams have Ronaldo, even though they've got Hungary in that first game. You then got João Cancelo there at 23%. Bruno Fernandes, heavily backed, 19%. And then Diogo Jota there at 10%. How many Portugal players have you got in your current team given their first fixture?
So I actually have none at the moment,
but
that isn't to mean that I won't, because I mean I'm still not really I'm not committed to a full draft yet. I want to get, as you know, I've been writing and editing a lot of these articles on site and very much working through each team with a fine tooth comb, which means it's hard to really build a team. I'm sort of taking each one as it goes, but I think I probably will own a defender for this first one.
Yep.
And I am kind of tempted by Ronaldo as well. When you think about, if you want a Portuguese attacker, I think it's kind of hard to look past him. I know he's really expensive, but I mean, he's still as good as he ever was. He's arguably got his best ever supporting cast. And there's a couple of records he can break, and he loves those. So if he wins a game at Euro 2020, then he will go past Fabregas and Iniesta for most games won by a player in this competition all time. Wow. If he scores a single goal, he'll go past Michel Platini as the outright top goal scorer in this competition of all time. So there's that, and I'm sure he knows about those because it's Ronaldo.
Oh yeah,
he will know about that. And then the other thing, as I said, the interesting thing about Portugal is that, I mean, I know it's Hungary, so the chances of them playing a conservative style against them perhaps are a bit lower, but just generally for the tournament is that while they have played 4-3-3 quite a lot recently, from what I can see, 4-4-2 has very much been a tried and tested method for Santos, and he likes playing it. Now, when he does play 4-4-2, interestingly enough, I think that's seen Bruno Fernandes on the left-hand side, and there isn't really any setup that Portugal play that really has a traditional number 10, because if they're going to play 4-3-3, then Fernandes has traditionally played on the left or the right of the three and plays a more box-to-box role that we've perhaps seen when when United play a bigger game. He doesn't really play number 10 as much. He plays like a number 8 that's more like a 6, like, dropping deep and winning the ball, which he is actually very good at. So if he's in a 4-3-3, he's not in his natural habitat. And if he's in a 4-4-2, again, there's no room for a number 10. So Bruno Fernandes was in one of my initial drafts, but I've taken him out now. Just having a look at the fact that to expect him to do what he does for Man United for Portugal is, and of course we assume he's not going to be taking penalties. We assume Ronaldo will be on those.
Oh yeah, there's no chance Ronaldo's giving those up.
So then if they do play 4-4-2, it's possible that Fernandes, Bernardo Silva, João Felix, Diogo Jota, one of those might actually have to miss out. So then, with that in mind, there's just no chance Ronaldo won't play. So for me, Ronaldo is he's the best attacker. If you're that confident that Portugal are going to win this game convincingly, I can't really see how you go for anyone other than Ronaldo.
So there's two schools of thought here to me. The first school of thought is it's Ronaldo against Hungary. We're expecting a big win for Portugal. I need to get Ronaldo in my team. He needs to be the priority. So over the likes of Kane, Lewandowski, Lukaku, all of these guys who are obviously top forwards, get him in there. The second school of thought, and one that I'm considering, is actually the main draw of Ronaldo is the captaincy, right, in that first game. But Portugal play last, so they're in the final match week, I believe. Yeah, they are, or very late
Group
on.
F, it'll be right at the end.
Right at the end. So for Ronaldo to be kind of the best captain possible, you basically need all of those other heavy hitters to all do nothing or do substantially worse than Ronaldo does. So because basically people are going to be going from like Chiesa in the first week, then they're going to go into Lukaku, then they're going to go to Kane, then they're going to like Lewandowski, Depay, or it kind of filters through. By the time it gets to Ronaldo, some of these other players could have scored double-digit returns anyway. And that means you're coming into Ronaldo, needing him to do something big to match those other players, just to get the most out of kind of the expensive price that he is. So you could actually avoid him and just assume that your other players are going to do other stuff. There's good forwards, like I mentioned. I think, Lewandowski, Kane and Lukaku, that's a strong three. You've got Depay in there as well. I'm not sure Ronaldo is essential as you might think he would be. I think he's the best captain choice this week, but given the format of how the game is structured, I think you can get away with it. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can see what you're saying. I mean, if you own Ronaldo and you also own Kane or Lukaku, which I mean that would take a lot to be honest.
Yeah.
But I mean the thing is that we're all spending a lot of money up front. So if you've got Ronaldo, you probably do have at least one other of those ones you mentioned. So then I do take the point. If you're coming into that final one, you might end up not captaining him. We often in FPL talk about oh well, I probably won't captain him, so I can't justify the 12 million. And a scenario where, so for example, I think Kane against Croatia is actually a really good bet because Croatia's defense is actually quite poor, despite having the best defender in the world in their team. The defense is pretty poor. So let's say he's done something. Are you going to take the captaincy off Kane and then give it to Ronaldo? I see what you mean. The decision to be like, it would make you. The conservative managers won't make that switch.
Absolutely.
So then don't own him. I get it.
It's an interesting. It's why this game is so interesting, because it gives you that decision to make, that risky decision making ability. You know, if Kane gets a goal, he gets 8 points, 9 points, or something. Do you then risk it on Ronaldo? He'd have to then get 2 goals or a goal and assist to make it worth it. Is the risk and reward worth it? And I'm not entirely sure it is, and I don't think those other strikers are going to get nothing in their games. So I if you look at my team, you can see the one I've got highlighted here because he's in my squad is Jota. He's an 8.5 million mid, and you know I can just sub him in. I'm not going to captain him, but I can sub him in for one of the players that maybe hasn't performed in my squad. There's bound to be a couple of those, and then I don't need to worry about paying that much money or that kind of captaincy option, because I'm going to assume that I've got points already from some of my premiums. So I'm happy with Jota just as kind of cover for that game. Personally, I probably will get a Portugal defender as well.
Nice, he's a midfielder.
Yeah,
he's very much out of position.
Yeah.
You would expect, because if he's going to play, you'd expect him to play in a sort of a forwards role, whether or not that could be in a front two. Could be in a front three, but either way, like, he's a goal scorer. He's who people would. Well, for Portugal, he is.
Well, yes. So, just as the final thing of this episode, let's just talk about Ronaldo this season. He's had a poor season by his standards. I think he's had his worst season for many, many years in terms of the goals scored. So you might think, oh, what? Has he only got 10 goals, 11 goals? No, he's got 29 goals in the league in 33 appearances, 4 and 6
more than the Golden Boot winner in the Premier League.
Absolutely. 2 in the Cup, and then won the Supercoppa Italia. So 36 goals in 44 appearances. So he's he's coming into the season in bad form, in bad Ronaldo form, which is still better than better than pretty much anyone else in the world. So yeah, and he's a flat track bully, right? He loves playing against teams like Hungary. He loves scoring goals. He's going to be so motivated, like you said. He's going to want to get that one goal against Hungary. I can't see any world in which Ronaldo does not score at least one goal against Hungary in that first game, personally.
Yeah.
So
same.
If you haven't
He's
got
the best
him,
Portuguese attacker.
Yeah, if you haven't got him and your other premiums don't do well, or maybe they only get one goal, I think if I had, say, I captained Kane and I had Ronaldo in my team and Kane just got one, I think I would risk it and give it to Ronaldo, because I'm just convinced that Ronaldo's going to get one in that first match. So something to think about, decisions to be made. I'm kind of getting into, I was a bit kind of worried about the new rules and, you know, all the different changes. And now I've kind of got my head around it all. It makes a nice change, actually, to be that kind of active manager. So there's risks to be made and points to be won and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, Ronaldo is definitely interesting, given that he plays on that final game. Cool. So that's it from us. That is Group F done. That is my marathon of group videos completed. Thanks for joining me again, David. Got some more articles coming out. What group are we up to in the articles on Scout?
Yes. So on the articles were around groups C and D. So at the moment, top of site, we've started to get a few team drafts. So if you want to go have a look at what some other people are picking in their team, then go and have a look there. Austria was the most recent team we looked at in an article form this morning, and later this evening, actually, I've just remembered, it's your article on Ukraine. If you want to hear all about Malinovsky and Yaremchuk, all those players, that's the next article. And then we got Croatia tomorrow morning. So we are working our way through them. England's coming on late Saturday as well. Great. Czech Republic on Sunday. So yeah, plenty to sink your teeth into. If you enjoy these videos and you also want to have a look at some even deeper data dives, then yeah, definitely check those out.
Yeah, and as soon as those articles are on site, I'll put the links in the description as well, so you'll be able to see those. But yeah, keep track of those. And also, if you're enjoying the Euro content, I'm going to carry on doing videos across the whole Euros. Gianni's going to be coming and doing some watch-alongs. We're going to have team reveals coming up next week. So make sure you like and subscribe the channel. But for now, David, thanks so much, and I will speak to you soon.